practice has caught the attention of Google and Apple. The tech giants have announced plans to add software that would enable contact tracing in their devices, making it possible for government agencies to track the distance between phones using approved apps. But the idea, as you can imagine, is raising concerns over privacy. For more on this, we're joined by Richard Lachman from Ryerson University. Richard, thank you so much for joining us. Let's get your reaction to this new technology overall.
Sure. So there's some really amazing ideas that I think any of us would be happy to hear. If we think our phones might help us get outside our houses and start the economy and start our lives back up again, that sounds on the surface really wonderful. There are a lot of problems with the idea, however. Being able to trace our location is something we haven't figured out in the last 10 or 20 years. We've been talking about being able to do this, and having to rush to this in the middle of a crisis, not necessarily fully understanding how government is going to track that information, who's going to get access to it, and what the implications are for a wider society. That's a bit of a problem.
Look, so many questions, because you look at Google and Apple, it's difficult to determine how exactly the software will be presented, designed. You contrast that with what is happening in Australia. 1 million people, I just read, have already subscribed to their app. Different technology altogether. A lot more privacy concerns perhaps with that. Can you sort of outline, what risks we could be looking at?
So there are maybe two main ways to think about doing this. The Google and Apple policy is trying to keep all the information on your own device. So the idea is there is no central authority that is able to look up where everyone has been and when they've been there. Your device will emit a signal. Other devices can pick it up. They maintain a record of what they're hearing. There's something reported to a central server, but it's anonymous. It doesn't contain a list of your name and your information unless you choose to share it. If you get a positive test under the Google and Apple idea, then you can choose voluntarily to report your current status, and then other users who may have been near you and might be at risk can be notified. Under the Australian approach, and also the NHS in the UK has just announced that they're following a different approach. They want a central authority. They want a single server under the control of the Public Health Authority that's able to read all this information and do its own connections. That can be better from an epidemiological point of view. If you're a central health authority, you want to know exactly who is at risk, who might have a positive test, and where they've been. The challenge is, what do you do with that data above and beyond contact tracing? Do you share it with law enforcement? Do you share it with immigration? Do you share it with other countries? In Canada, we've had challenges. Ontario has shared mental health records with U.S. Border Patrol. There have been cases where we've taken disclosures you may make for customs and tried to check that against your EI claims. Now, these may be helpful for a certain branch of government, but we don't necessarily have authority. We as society haven't necessarily said, we're comfortable with my government knowing where I am and being able to share that with any agency that it wants in order to enforce what that agency might want to do.
And therein lies the conflict, isn't it, between the battle to have public health and protect everyone's health, and the battle to protect people's privacy. And do you find we're going along that line a little too far in some respects? A lot of people are happy to give up certain aspects of their privacy, given the greater good. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of questions that I think are really important in this. One, if this is a conversation we want to have, is in the middle of a crisis the time to talk about privacy? Clearly there's urgency. And if there's a way our phones can help, we want to accept that. But what we might want to see is a government that's fairly upfront about when it's going to use that information and what else it might do. In other words, there might be a promise. We will never use this information for any other claim. We will delete this information after 2 weeks. These kind of promises might give me a little more comfort in saying, I'm okay giving up privacy in the middle of a crisis, knowing that it's not going to change fundamentally society. The second thing is, oh yeah, go ahead.
No, forgive me, because we're up against the clock, but you raised some very important questions, and we really appreciate your time with all of this. It's an important conversation to have. Richard Lachman, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks, Anthony.